Hey guys, I'm going to walk you through a judo warm-up. It is mobility focused, so the purpose of this isn't to jack your heart rate up very much. The purpose is to go slow and really hone into what's going on in the joints themselves. So as we go through, make sure you're paying attention to the details and how each joint feels. Try not to rush it at all. So I'll take you through a few movements that I like and I know that are beneficial for preparing your joints for those awkward loads in judo, like here, some twisting stuff, being on your toes. So let's get started. We're gonna be on one knee for starters. And I'll show you from the side. I'm gonna tuck my hips under so that I tension a stretch in the front. So I'm tensioning a stretch in my hip flexor. And first, let's go do the next. We're gonna do a little bit of multitasking. I'm still feeling the stretch here while I move my neck. I'm gonna pull my shoulders down away from my ears. I like to use my hands to clasp together and use them for feedback. And then I'm gonna dip my chin, twist. I'm gonna try to look over my left shoulder as far as I can. Once I can't look over my shoulder anymore, I'm gonna draw a big arch in the ceiling with my chin. Look over my other shoulder. Find my collarbone and trace it down to the center. Let's reset. Let's go the other direction. I'm going to look over my right shoulder. Draw a big circle in the air with your chin. Watch here that your shoulders stay low. Look over your other shoulder as much as you can. And dip low to where you started. We'll do one more per direction. Make sure you're still feeling the stretch in the front of your left hip if your left knee is down. One more in the other direction. All right. So then we're going to move our shoulder blades. So here I want to make sure that I'm making a big circle. If like there's a pencil sticking out of the side of my shoulder here, I want to make a big circle with that pencil. And I want you to make it as full as possible. So rather than kind of like a triangle, try to really carve out each of those corners. So for starters, I'm just going to reach towards the floor with my fingertips. And then I'm going to shrug up and forward, forward and down and back and up and forward. So let's go that direction one more time. Down, together and back and up. And then I'm going to reverse it. And go ahead and try out different positions with your arms because sometimes your elbows are going to want to move in certain directions. Here, I notice a lot of people like to move their elbows. So if you just want to start with elbows bent, that's also a great idea. You can really isolate the shoulders. So shrug and back, down and forward and up and back and down and forward and up. Now I'm also making sure that I'm not moving my spine along with my shoulders. I want to make sure that whatever I'm mobilizing, I'm sticking to that joint and isolating that joint. So we're going to switch sides now, and we're going to feel the stretch this time on your right hip if you're following along with the sides. Again, I'm going to tuck my pelvis under so that I tension the tissue in the front of my hip. And then from here, I'll show you from the front. I'm feeling a stretch here, and I'm going to rotate my ball and socket. So your shoulder joint is a ball and socket that we want to make sure can rotate all the way through as well as twisting. So I'm going to reach up and forward across my midline with a straight elbow, reach above my head, and here I'm making sure that I'm not shrugging. So double check that, make sure you're anti-shrugged. Once you can't go any further back, you're going to twist at the bicep and notice that my hand turns along with my whole arm, and I've just made a huge circle with my ball and socket joint. I'm going to reverse it and go back the way I came, reaching way back, rotating. It's like I'm wringing out a towel in that joint, and then I come back across the midline. I'll show you from the side. I'm still feeling a stretch here. Up I go, far back as I can without compromising my shoulder. I twist, keeping my shoulder down, keeping my elbow straight. So let's go ahead and do that on the other shoulder. I'm still feeling this stretch here. Up across the midline. I twist from this joint, reach as far back to that wall behind me as I can, and I make my way back. We'll do one more on this side. It's like I have a high five in the front. I reach overhead, I twist to get a high five in the back. And then I reach back for that high five towards the wall. I twist to get a high five in the front. All right. So next up, we're going to do some full spinal cars. Cars means controlled articular rotation. It just means that we're isolating each joint as we move it. So I really want to pay attention to just my spine rather than my hips now. So I'm going to get into a seiza position because I'm going to need to mobilize my ankles anyway later on. So I'm going to, again, multitask. I'm going to cross my arms so that I get them out of the way, and I'm going to fold my spine as much as possible. Imagine that you're curling every single vertebrae. It's like I'm getting my collarbones to talk to my belly button, and from there I'm going to twist as far as I can. So my collarbones, I'm trying to get them to look at the camera. And then once I can't twist anymore, I'm going to dip this shoulder down to my heel. And then from there, I'm going to twist to get my collarbones to look at this other wall behind me here. Dipping this shoulder down now, tucking, just like I did in the beginning, and then twisting all the way to the front. So I'll show you in this view. Now I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to tuck or round my back, twist, getting my collarbones to look this direction, dip the shoulder, rotate to look the opposite direction, curl or tuck, and twist. We'll do one more per direction, tucking, twisting, rocking, twisting, tucking, twisting. One more time. Tucking, twisting, rocking, twisting, rocking, and twisting. All right, check it out. From here, we're going to get down into what's called a tactical frog position. So get your knees spread apart. You can have your feet also spread apart, or if this bothers your knees at all, you can always come closer with your toes. So modify it to make your knees comfy and happy. From here, I'm going to make sure that my chest is proud and my back is straight. And I'm going to reach through with one arm. I'm going to try to touch this shoulder to the floor and get a really big twist in my upper back. If you feel this in your lower back, you're going to want to adjust because I want to twist my upper spine. Your upper spine is what's used for mobility. Your lower spine or your lumbar spine is what's needed for stability. I'm going to do 5 per side here. That's 1 and 1 for me. I'm using this free hand to push against the floor and help me into a deeper stretch. If you've found your limit, no need to pry into a deeper stretch. But the more you do this, the more mobility you'll get. That's 2 and 2. And like I said, we're multitasking to get the best bang for our buck, so I'm feeling a nice subtle stretch on the insides of my legs. If it gets a little too intense, just walk your knees a little bit closer, no big deal. I'm breathing with my reps. Slow, deep, and relaxed breaths so that my nervous system can calm down if I feel an intense stretch. This is number 4 per side for me. I'm prying a little bit deeper now than my first reps, which is great. Last one per side. Again, as you get deeper, you still want to make sure that it's mostly in the upper back, the upper spine. Not supposed to feel any tweaks in your lower back. So if you do, you're going to want to back out and adjust. All right. Next up, we're going to do a little bit more hips. So now that you've felt, if I were pretending I was on the floor just like I was, the floor is here and I was spreading my knees, or the floor is helping me spread my knees far apart. So I really felt it in my hips and my adductors. So we're going to feel very much similarly in a second when we do that. So I'm going to start in 90-90 for this one. We're going to address the hips. And from here, I want to start with a stretch in my front hip. So I feel it, this is my right side, so I feel it in my front right butt cheek hip area. You might even feel some tension or stretching in your front adductor too, and that's fine. So start with that stretch, and then we're going to rock back. I'm going to use my hands. I'm going to lift my back knee. I'm keeping this knee down on the floor as long as possible, and I'm going to try to spread my knees just like I was a second ago on the floor and find that same stretch in my adductors. And I'm going to make a pit stop in the middle, grab my ankles or shins, whatever's most comfortable for you, and I'm going to pry my chest through. So I'm fighting myself to achieve a really upright posture. So I don't want to hang out here. I want to punch through and use my armpits to spread my knees and push my chest through. Take a few breaths here in the middle, and then we're going to continue. Use your hands as much as you need to on over to the other side. Now we've made it to the other side. Feel the same stretch in your front leg. So I'm going to lean forward. I'm going to dump my pelvis forward. It's like if it was a bowl of soup, I'm dumping the soup forward so that I prime that tension there to feel my left glute and left hamstring. And then I'm just going to make my way back. We're going to do 5 per side. Make that same pit stop in the middle. Get tall, pry your chest through, fight for your posture. Your armpits are on. Shoulders are not in your ears. They're away from your ears. And then make your way over to the other side again. And this time, if you want a little bit more prying in that front glute, you can kick your back leg back and get into a pigeon position. Make sure you play around with the front shin angle. Completely horizontal is going to be a more intense stretch, so if your knee doesn't like that, you can always bring your foot in and ease off on your knee. Here you can play with 2 different angles with your pelvis. You can tuck your pelvis, and I feel the same front hip stretch that we did in the beginning when we first started, so kind of like in my hip flexor. Or I can dump my pelvis forward again. Remember the bowl of soup dumping forward, and I can really tension that front glute hip area. So whatever your body's talking to you about, you can tension whichever one you have a preference for or you need the most. Again, I'm using my hands behind me to prop my chest open. Stop in the middle for a breath or 2. And then go on over to the other side. The first sets, I usually do slow, and then I can get into a little bit of a rhythm as my joints start to warm up and loosen up. Make sure you're always prying your knees apart in the middle. Don't rush through that part. set for me. Still spreading my knees, pivoting on the back foot, coming up, using your hands as much as you need to elevate your hips. When I first started doing pigeon, my hips were all the way up here, so it just takes some time. Prying in the middle. I like to make sure that I'm breathing through my nose, because that's a direct line to your nervous system. You're going to get more bang for your buck out of any mobility training and out of any normal training as well. So it's the same thing. In between my jiu-jitsu or judo matches, I try to return to nasal breathing as soon as I can. Obviously, the more intense the training is, I may not be breathing through my nose, but at least in my rep periods, I try to return to nasal breathing. I have one more per side, and then we're going to move on. For my guard players, it's really important that your hips have the mobility that they need so that you don't wind up putting the mobility in your lower back, right? We have a lot of lower back pain in certain situations, and especially in jiu-jitsu and judo. So as much as we can get the hips the requisite mobility that they need to perform the demands, then we won't be asking our lower back to do more than it's supposed to be doing. Prying. And last. All right. We're going to do a little bit of wrists and fingers. So I'm going to start by placing my hands in between my knees. That's the position I like to do. And I'm spreading my thumb and my pinky as far apart as possible and leaning forward so that I get a nice crease in my wrist. So I'm feeling a stretch in my forearm and also feeling some tension in my wrist. If you feel any pinching here, that's not a good sign. You want to back off. But as long as you just feel stretching, that's great. So I'm going to rock forward and back 5 times-ish. And all the while, I'm making sure that I'm pressing into the floor with my whole finger, each one, and my whole palm. I don't want to start bubbling here. I want to really stretch that tissue in the fingers and palms of my hands. And then I'm going to switch to side to side, going over the pinky and the thumb. Again, make sure that your shoulders haven't crept into your ears. We're going to reverse it. This one, I like to go outside of my knees because this one gets a little bit intense sometimes. Same idea though, I'm spreading my pinky and my thumb apart and I'm trying to maintain as much contact with the floor as possible. I don't want to lose contact with my fingers. So keep stretching left and right, shoulders away from the ears. You can put as much or as little pressure onto the backs of your hands as you need to. You remember, the farther back you go, the easier it'll be. The further up you go, the more intense the stretch will be. So going forward and back now. I just went side to side. All right. And then you're going to make fists. Let's do some wrist cars. So I'm going to make a big, big circle with my wrist. Really important here to isolate the wrist. I'm not going to turn my forearm, right? So it's as if I'm balancing something on my forearm. I don't want to let it slip off. Because if I rotate my forearm, no big deal, but now I'm not mobilizing my wrist, I'm mobilizing my elbows. Might hear a few snap crackles, no big deal, as long as it's not accompanied by pain. And finally, giving a little extra stretch. We do a lot of hard gripping, especially in grappling and if you do kettlebells as well. So we want to practice If we shorten all this tissue all the time, we want to practice elongating it as well. I'm going to get both hands. Ankles and toes. I'm going to start with a chokehold on my shin so that my shin and my knee don't go anywhere. I'm just mobilizing my ankles, so I'm going to make a huge circle with my toes here. And I want to make such a big circle that I feel a stretch on the opposite side of where I'm going with my toes. So if I'm going up, I'm trying to feel a stretch here. Going to the left, I try to feel a stretch here. Pointing, I try to feel a stretch here on the top, and so on. Get both directions. Here again, I want to go slow enough to notice if there are any parts of my circle that my body just wants to skip over, because those are the ranges that my nervous system doesn't know quite what to do with, and those are the sections where I'm more likely to injure my ankle in, because they don't have as much of a good connection there. We're doing about 2 big slow ones per direction. I'm using my toes in this case because it helps me engage the muscles in my feet. And we're about to do a lot of footwork here. All right, we're going to start in seiza position. I'll show you from the side. And I'm going to lean forward, tuck my toes under, and if you need to, you can even scoot your knees back to get an even better pry on those toes. Sit on your toes for a few seconds. If that's a little too intense, you can always just offload onto your knees as much as you need to. But go ahead and get that good stretch in your toes. There's a lot of dexterity and strength in the feet and toes and ankles that's needed in judo, especially because oftentimes we're only on one leg throwing a person, so both our body weight and the body weight of somebody else on 1 foot or 2 feet, right? And we need a lot of dexterity and strength to pivot, in an instant. If it's going the wrong way, we have to pivot, right? So a lot of toe strength is needed. I'm back to seiza. I'm just going to switch back and forth. You can go slower than this. Go ahead and just stop the video if you need to just kind of sit a little bit more on your toes. I'm just going to show you 5 reps here. Again, I'm able to come down, get a stretch on the front of my ankle. Again, if that's too intense, always use your hands as needed. And then as I come up, I'm scooting my knees back so I get every bit of that stretch in the toes that I can. Once I've done that 5-ish times, I'm going to stand up with it. Try to stand up with as much control as you can get. Come down with as much control as you can get. Softly land on the knees. Come back to where we were. Back on the toes.